Hello, everybody. My name is Doliner, and today I'll be presenting a case study on the 737 Boeing MAX. And this is for the Engineering Management and Communication and Ethics class from Reliance College. Let's begin with a quick introduction to this case study. So, our main participant in this is the Boeing company, the airplane manufacturer, which was increasingly worried around the 2010s about their competitor Airbus, which created a new airplane that was fairly popular at the time, which is the Airbus A320. And 6 years later, after their announcement in 2011, they released a commercial narrow-body airliner called this Boeing 737 MAX, which is a newer iteration over previous models. The 737 had been introduced in several iterations beforehand, and their main focus on this one is to create a narrow-body airliner that did not require any special training or simulation work from the pilots that were introduced to this plane. And this had several reasons regarding costs. So in our report for this, we explained that for Boeing, it would cost $1 million per plane if they needed to require any special training or simulation work from part of the pilots using this plane. And a major catastrophe that happened with this plane 1 year after the release in 2017 is that first Lion Air Flight 610 crashed in the Java Sea in Indonesia closely after departing. And this already raised some concerns about the new aircraft since it had just 1 year of release time, of production time. But the ultimate fallout of Boeing, or the focus on them, was because 6 months later, the Flight 302 of Ethiopian Airlines crashed in the Ethiopian desert and caused main disrupt, as it caused the plane to be grounded, basically. And in these two accidents or catastrophes, all passengers and crew members lost their lives, totaling out to 346 casualties. So let's talk a little bit about the causes for this disaster. So in the creation of the 737 MAX, the aircraft counted with a unique weight distribution. Since it was an upgrade from the previous models of the 737, it meant the engines have to be placed further to the front. And this caused, since the engines are massive, they cause a unique weight distribution that affected the handling of the airplane. And since Boeing did not want to provide any special training, or did not want airlines to provide a special training for pilots, this meant that they had to accommodate for this weight distribution handling system, creating something called MCAS. So MCAS wasn't particularly created for this. It was already used in previous iterations of military grade Boeing airplanes, but for this particular design, MCAS was initially just used as a fail-safe mechanism, so that when the nose of the plane pointed too high up, meaning that the plane would stall, it would serve as a stabilizer, so it will automatically stabilize the plane. And this MCAS system just refers to maneuvering characteristics augmentation system. It's a software system that overrides the manual controls of the pilots to provide a stabilizing mechanism. It moves the control from the pilots themselves into the airplane's computer, basically. And after, as I said, this was just a fail-safe mechanism at first, but after pilots reported that it was, after some test runs that they did with the plane, they reported that it was suboptimal the way that it was handling at the beginning. So they adopted this MCAS system not just as a failsafe, but for other situations such as takeoff. So it will basically activate, provide an assist for pilots when during takeoff, or particularly hard situations where they need good handling of the plane. And this picture and the slide just shows the characteristics of this system. So as I said earlier, when the angle of attack, which is just the nose of the plane or the angle of the body or the front of the plane towards the back of the plane. It's the angle of attack. And if this turned too high, the plane will it's out of stabilize itself using the rear wings, as you can see in the picture. So what were the specific causes for this disaster? So the MCAS system previously mentioned was never included in the pilot's manual for the 737. And this was due to the particular reason that it required a special training by the part of the pilots for them to properly operate this new system. And since it had no mention in the manual and they had no prior training to it, they were not able to accommodate themselves when this system was engaged. And basically, this system in the two crashes mentioned earlier were caused because the sensor, the angle of attack sensor, basically what tells the computer what the angle of attack of the plane is, were malfunctioning, were mal-calibrated. So the computer was receiving readings that the plane was at an angle that it wasn't. So the pilots, as they were experiencing it and they felt this change in the actual handling of the plane, they didn't know how to react to it, and the plane would point downwards in a situation where it shouldn't. And ultimately, what happened from the pilot's perspective is that the plane was going down at a faster rate than they expected it to. And when they received the information from control on how to handle the situation, it was already too late. The planes are already crashed into the ground. And the two plane crashes had the same cause, which is failure in the angle of attack sensor. And as I mentioned earlier, this lack of training provided to the pilots, this meant that they were not experienced in how the MCAS system was operating and when it would activate. So these two facts meant that this flaw in the design of the MCAS, which is not reacting properly when the angle of attack sensor is malfunctioning, meant that the pilots couldn't really recover it. And since they were not required to have any particular training, they were not aware of this issue with the plane. It's also worth noticing that the MCAS system did not have any failsafe or redundancies regarding the angle of attack sensor. So the computer was only relying on the readings of one sensor, when in retrospect, it could have more redundancy using more sensors to detect. If you're getting two different readings from the sensors, then something must be wrong. We shouldn't activate MCAS. And it's really sad because if this system was never introduced, maybe the people in both planes would have been alive today. So let's talk a little bit about the ethical issues that relate to this. So Boeing initially, when the first airplane crashed in Indonesia, in the Indonesian Sea of Java, they initially reacted in denial, saying that it was mainly due to pilots' mistraining or lack or pilot errors that caused this incident and not failures in the design of the plane. And after the second crash, they even doubled down and refused this responsibility until further investigation from the FAA, the Flight Aviation Administration, just proved them wrong, saying that it was a failure within the system that caused the pilots to lose control on handling of the plane. And as I mentioned, the FAA provided and did an investigation on the system after the planes were grounded in March 2019. And they revealed that it was due to a malfunction in this MCAS system. The two main issues, ethically speaking, for this case are conflict of interest and fraud. So for conflict of interest, Boeing was willing to risk the lives of people to have their planes require as little training as possible. And they, especially management, knew about these issues and basically wanted this plane to come out as fast as possible and require as little training as possible from the part of the pilots. And this was also and conflict of interest because they sacrificed the lives of people to have their products be cheaper and be more marketable. And it's also a fraud case because they misled the FAA, the regulatory body, into certifying the 737 MAX when basically the FAA, how it regulates new aircrafts, it delegates some of the tasks of certification to the company itself if the system is not a particular, let's say, a primordial system in the plane. And the way that they deceived the FAA into certifying the MCAS system is because, as I mentioned earlier, initially it was just a failsafe mechanism. So because it was such a small system that just occurred in small occasions for the plane and in a different event, basically, it meant that it wasn't as significant as really Boeing described it. So basically, they described the MCAS system to be this small feature to the FAA so that they could certify it themselves and not have the FAA go and send a representative to actually go and certify it. And Boeing was charged after the planes were after the investigation was conducted. Not really charged. They reached a settlement with the U.S. government because they were charged with fraud allegations against the U.S. government, since the FAA is a government agency. So let's sum up the outcomes of this case study. So in total, we had a sad outcome of 346 fatalities across both accidents. We also had that the plane itself, the plane model, was grounded for 20 months, which is the largest grounding in aviation history in the United States. And it had an impact of $20 million and $1 billion in the company itself. And there's just direct losses due to the groundings, and another $60 billion in indirect losses through these groundings. So in total, you can see $80 billion in just losses due to these groundings. And this is reported by CNN in 2020 after the planes were able to get back and running. So, and also they had the loss of having these $2.8 billion in settlement over this fraud with the US government. So what is the future of the 737 MAX? So as I mentioned, in October 2020, the FAA submitted a review for the 737 MAX, and specifically they wanted to tackle these issues with the MCAS system. And among the things that they highlighted to Boeing that they needed to improve in order to have the plane recertified, they needed to provide proper training and proper manuals to the pilots. And they also have to revise these manuals to include documentation of the MCAS system so that the pilots were aware of what the system was and how to react to it. They also have to revise the 737 MAX to add failsafe situations for the MCAS. So as explained earlier, basically use more angle of attack sensors in order to detect when to activate MCAS and only activate it when it's really necessary to activate it. And Boeing fixed these issues with the aircraft, and then the FAA pushed or allowed them for recertification in November 2020. So in general, very sad issue, but thankfully everything was able to be resolved. And now that the plane is back online, these issues that were properly or previously examined and seen for the 737 MAX are fixed, and hopefully in the future nothing ever happens again with these issues. So again, here are my references. Most of the information provided here is provided from a good documentary, which is Frontline from PBS. which an hour-long documentary which explains a lot of the situations and the ethical issues regarding this case. So thank you for your time and have a good day.